Okay, today we are going to factor polynomials, and we are going to use prime factorization, a skill that you learned several years ago, on how we can break down these polynomials and factor them. So our first one, we're just going to jump right into examples. We've got 12a squared plus 16a. I'm going to break down my 12a squared first, and that's 4 times 3, or 2 times 2 times 3, and I've got 2 a's. 1, 2. My 16a, well, that's 4 times 4, so that's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times a. Now we want to see, what do they share in common? Well, I have 2 2's here, and I have 2 here. I don't have a 3, and I don't have any more 2's in 12, and I don't have any 3's in 16. So I go to my variables. I have 2 a's, and I have 1, so I can factor out 1a from each of them. 1a from each of them. So my prime factorization would be 2 times 2 is 4, and I take out the a. So I'm going to take 4a from both of those terms. And what am I going to be left with? So 12 divided by 4 is going to leave me with 3. And I have 2 a's, but I only took 1. So I have 1a left. And what do I have left for my 16? What do I have that's not squared off? And that would be 2 times 2, which is 4. This is almost like a reverse distributive property. So if I was to distribute that 4a to both terms, I'm going to get 12a squared plus 16a. All right, example 2. We've got 18c d squared plus 12c squared d plus 9cd. Okay, so we're going to break down each one of these terms and see what they share in common. So we have 18. Now break them down into prime factorization. So I know that 18 is 9 times 2, and 9 is broken down as 3 times 3. So we have 3 times 3, which is 9, times 2, which is 18. I have 1c, and I have 2 d's. Now my 12c squared d, I just broke down 12 up above, so I know that that's going to be 3 times 2 times 2. And then I have 2 c's, and I have 1 d. Then my last term, 9cd. Well, 9 can be broken down as 3 times 3. And we have 1c, and we have 1d. Okay, what do we see that they share in common? Well, right away, I see each of one of these have a 3. So I have 3's. I have a 3 for 18 and a 3 for 9, but I don't have a 3 for 12. So I can't use that 3. I have a 2 for 18, a 2 for 12, but I don't have a 2 for 9. So I cannot take anything more than the 3. The 3 is going to be one of my factors. Okay, now let's look at our variables. Well, I can tell right away that I have a c here, a c, and a c. So I can definitely take a c from each one of those terms. I have an extra c for 12, but I can't use it. And then I do notice that I have a d for each one of my terms. So I have 3CD. D. Okay, so now let's see when we factor that out, what we're left with. So 18 divided by 3 is 6. I had one C, I took that C, so that disappears, that cancels each other out. I have two D's and I took one, so I have to add another D. Next term, 12 divided by 3 leaves me with 4, and if I look here, I have 2 times 2 is 4, and I have 4C. So we can do it that way, but remember, it's nothing more than division. And then the last one, what do I have left here? I have just a 3. So if I did 9 divided by 3, I would get 3. And I have a C divided by C, that cancels, and D divided by D cancels. So that would be our answer. That is our factorization for example 2. Okay, now there's something that we call factor by grouping. So if I have 4AB plus 8B plus 3A plus 6. Now if I look at those 4 terms, I don't have anything that they share in common in those 4 terms. But I do notice my first 2 terms, I can actually factor a value and a variable out of there. And if I look at my last 2 terms, I can factor a number out of there. We want to group them so that we can find common factors. So I am going to put parentheses around the 2 sets of numbers that I want to group together, and now I'm going to find the greatest common factor for each one of those groups. So I look at my 4, and I know that 4 is a factor of 8. So I know that I can factor out a 4. And I know that they both terms share a B, so I'm going to factor out a B. So what am I left with? 4 divided by 4 is 1, so that's gone. I need to keep that A because I am not able to factor out an A. And with my B, B divided by B is 1, and that's also gone. 8 divided by 4 is 2, and B divided by B is 1, so that's gone. Okay, so I've now grouped those together and factored out the numbers. Now for this one, I'm going to factor out the only thing I can, which is a 3. So when I take a 3A divided by 3, I'm left with A, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So if you notice, these 2 in parentheses that we factored are the same. So now I can make a combination, and I could say 4B plus 3, and that is going to be times A plus 2, because they both share A plus 2 in common. Okay, now there's one more because I want to show you what we might have to do with one of those groupings. So we have 35x minus 5xy, and I'm going to group that with 3y minus 21. Okay, I'm going to already group those because I know that I can find a factor, a GCF here, and a GCF here. So I'm looking at both of those, and I know in the first one that I can factor out a 5, because I know that a 5 is my smallest value, and I know that it's a factor of 35, and they both share an x. Okay, so when I do that, 35 divided by 5 is 7, x divided by x is gone, 5 divided by 5 is gone, x divided by x is gone, and that would leave me with y. Here, I'm going to factor out a 3. So if I factor out a 3, that would leave me with y minus 7. Now, if you notice, these two are not the same because the first one, the y is negative, and the second factored is the 7 is negative. So in order to do this, these have to be exactly the same. So I am going to factor out of this first parenthesis a negative 1. So if I do 5x times negative 1, and then I would do 7 minus negative 7 plus y. I took a negative 1 out of there. And then that would still give me 3 and y minus 7. So this can be written as y minus 7. So at the end, I'm going to have negative 5x plus 3, because I multiplied that negative 5x times, 5x times negative 1, and that gave me a negative 5x. And now this becomes y minus 7. Because I factored out that negative 1, now these two sets of parentheses would be exactly the same.